Welcome to Creative Piecemeal. I'm Tammy Takaishi, a board-certified music therapist. Join me each week as a new guest from across the fine and creative arts spheres shares struggles, triumphs, laughs, words of wisdom, and more in authentic, thought-provoking, and inspiring interviews. Hello and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. Today I am joined by poet and author John Yamrus. He was on the show before, so definitely be sure to check his first appearance out. We are aiming to answer some different questions this time around, so both episodes, you can listen to them out of order, but both will be very interesting and insightful. John is a very talented writer. As soon as I was introduced to his work, I was captivated by it. And John, you've been in the business for over 50 years. You've got tons of books out. For those who haven't, listened to any of your episodes yet, either on my podcast or on the Meat for Tea cast, if you could just sort of recap like how you got into the business and what are some of the latest books that have come out and are coming out.
Okay. Asking how I got into the business of being a writer is, I've told it a million times and it never gets old, at least for me as far as the story, because I've been a writer now for 55 years come March, 55 years being a working writer. I'm using air quotes when I say working because you can't make a living from being a writer, but I've been doing this for going on 55 years. And when I first started, like every aspiring writer, I was 19, 20, something like that. And I had a good friend and we both wanted to be writers. And we ran into the common problem that most aspiring writers have is that people would say, well, where have you been published? What kind of awards have you won? And of course, at that age, at that time in our life, we hadn't been published anywhere, which is why we were sending our stuff out and we hadn't won any awards. So, and this is a true story. One night, my buddy Rick and I, the aspiring writer friend of mine, were walking back to his house after having just finished a bottle of Pop-Off vodka. Now, if you don't know Pop-Off vodka, I don't even know if they still make it, but back then it was like $4.95 for a fifth, and it was really bad stuff. Anyway, had to be about 2:00 in the morning, and we're walking back towards his house and complaining that we couldn't get published because we hadn't been published anywhere and we hadn't won any awards. And we got to the corner of Oliver and Wakefield Street. One of us finished off it had to be Rick, finished off the last slug of the vodka. He looked up at the street sign, Wakefield Street, handed me the bottle of vodka and said, "Here, I hereby award you the Wakefield Prize." I took the bottle of vodka and walked home, and I swear to God, it's a true story. The next day, I mailed off to what was then one of the premier poetry magazines in the country. I wrote off to them saying, I've recently been awarded the prestigious Wakefield Prize. Would you please consider publishing my work? Sent it off. I continued doing, what I was doing. A couple of weeks later, I get this piece of mail in the mail from the editor of that magazine with a note that said, "I've heard about you recently winning the Wakefield Prize. Congratulations. We'd like to publish your work." And that's the true story of the lie that got me into this 55 years of being a writer. Man, I'm talking on long here. I'm monopolizing things. But you asked me how I got started and what's new. Not counting books that have appeared in translation, I've published, I think my 41st book will be coming out probably sometime in the next couple of days, and we could talk about that later. But I'm talking too much. You talk. Ask me a question. Let's talk.
This is the John Yamrus show right now. You can talk as much as you want to. I love that story though of how you got started, and it's bold and it's creative, and it's a wonderful way to be like, you know what? This is my presence in the world. This is my stamp. I'm going to just go out there and I'm going to find a way to make it work. And I love that. And you have.
Uh, work. Work is the key word for me. And I talk about this a lot. And I think we talked about this last time when I was on your show. And I grew up in the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area. Back then, it was a heavy coal mining area. The coal mines were dying out, at least in Pennsylvania at that point in time. This is the late 1950s. And it seemed there was a church on every corner and a bar on every corner that didn't have a church. But everyone either worked in the mines or worked in businesses associated with the mines. And growing up as a kid back then, none of us had much money, much of anything. But all of our parents who were usually veterans from the war or went through the Depression, we were taught a good, solid work ethic. And I think I picked that up and applied it to my ethic as a writer. I take my work as a writer very seriously. As an example, I'll meet aspiring writers when I do a reading, and they're always talking about, I'll say, what are you doing now? Well, I'm waiting for the inspiration before I start my work. And I always want to punch them right in the face, because if you're waiting to be inspired, you're fooling yourself. You have to every day get out and do the work. And if you're lucky, inspiration will come. But more often than not, you just get the work done. And for me, at least, that's paid off in that, well, like we said, I've got 41 books out, and I've published just under 3,500 poems. And people talk, when I get introduced, people will go, holy God, that's a lot. It's really more, sure, it's a lot, but it's more attributed to being consistent, being professional, and doing the work every day. Again, I'm talking too much. Let's continue.
Well, I mean, you bring up such great points there, being consistent. And that means different things to different people. I mean, people might be trying to have a creative writing or painting or whatever, career while also raising kids and having a full-time job.
Absolutely.
And it's finding a rhythm and a balance that works for you personally and your own creative path. And that looks different for different people at different stages in life. And I come across a lot of people who, sometimes they feel guilty, like, oh, I should be giving myself more time for art, or, oh, I'm doing too much and I'm, neglecting my family. Like, a lot of it is mindset and figuring out what works for you and your family, and setting healthy boundaries. And it's different for different people. And sometimes
setting boundaries.
Yeah.
I always tell people, you don't have to be doing it, 10 hours a day. 10 minutes. That's all I tell people. Go down, write a submission note to somebody. 10 minutes, that's all it takes. But if you get those habits of doing something every, I'll be 74 in a couple of weeks. And I didn't always have the time or the ability or the freedom to be writing several hours a day. I worked jobs. I worked a lot of factory jobs. Worked a lot of sales jobs. I was the worst salesman you ever saw. But I worked my share of jobs. But I always tried to do that 10 minutes a day just to keep my fingers in with the art. And I just did an interview with the magazine. You're talking about collaboration, a magazine that's focused about people collaborating in the arts, whether it be, being part of a band or anything like that, writing a book with someone. For me, I said to the editor, why do you want to talk with me? And she said, well, I'm sure in ways you're collaborating too. And she was right, because even though my books only have my name on them, I collaborate with a lot of people in the people that give me the ideas for my poems, the inspiration, to use that dreaded I word, or the people that create the covers or do the design or the layout or help me help me get the book sold or book me into doing readings. So it's all a collaboration. Whole life is a collaboration if you look at it that way.
Very true. We just passed another calendar year. I was wondering, what is a book that you read this past year that you really enjoyed?
I read a book called The Barn. That's an important book. It's a book about the birth of the civil rights movement. Yeah, I can't say too much about that. I can't say enough about that book called The Barn. I'm currently reading Guy de Maupassant's book, Bel Ami, a wonderful novel from 1885. Maupassant is known mostly for his short stories, but he did write 6 novels, one of which Tolstoy called one of the greatest books he's ever read. I'm currently reading that, but I'm always reading many books at once, 5, 6, sometimes as many as 7. I keep books in there. You probably do the same. Books in every room, because you don't always feel like reading a serious book. You might want a biography or something like that. But in that interview I did the other day, the editor asked me to name those 3 books you would take to that desert island. And sometimes it changes, but my answer then a week ago was I would take Grapes of Wrath, which I read every 2-3 years, just because it's like the Bible to me. I read Marcel Proust.
I remember that.
Remembrance of Things Past. He's not for everybody, but it's like what Joan Baez said about Bob Dylan. You don't always get them. Not everybody gets them, but if you get them deep. And I get Proust really deep. I think it's funny. A lot of people call Proust boring, but I find it anything but boring. The 3rd book I'd take to that island is Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, don't laugh.
No, it's a good one.
That's another book. All 3 of these books I read every couple of years. Dracula I read because probably, without a doubt, the scariest book I've ever read. It was published, I think, in the late 1890s, right around the time, you got Jack the Ripper and all that stuff going on, and Victorian horror. And Dracula, without being overly bloody or graphic or anything like that, for my money, is the scariest book I've ever read, except maybe the Bible, but that's a whole other story.
So, you've had a very, a long and continued career, and you said your birthday's coming up soon. Are you doing anything special specifically for this birthday? And what is something that you've crossed off your bucket list recently?
Boy, we have, my wife Kathy and I have our 50th wedding anniversary coming up.
Oh, congrats.
50 years. She really deserves a prize. And I remember a kid, we were talking about this the other day, when my grandparents had their 50th anniversary as a little kid, and they looked like, monuments on, like statues. They look like ancient. And now I look in the mirror and I think, hey, 50 years I've been married. I'm not that old. I can still get out and shovel the sidewalks. And even when we hung our Christmas light, crazy me, I was still up on a ladder. So I could still do a few things. When I was a kid, I rode off to Robert Graves back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. His most famous book was called The White Goddess, a book, a discussion about classical literature. And I wrote him a fan letter. And in fact, when he wrote back, I was shocked to see that he wrote back. And he wrote back saying he's 74, but can still defend himself in a pinch. And I realized I'm 74 now, and hopefully I can still defend myself in a pinch.
Well, congrats early on, both of those anniversaries, not only your birthday, but your wedding anniversary. Any advice for the younger the younger people out there in regards to getting that far in life?
Getting that far in life with the marriage? Oh man, hey, I'm not the best at it, but say yes a lot. Say yes a lot because guys are basically stupid. So say yes and agree a lot. But Kathy figures very strongly in my poetry. Our dog Stella. Stella is the first dog we ever had to turn 10, double digits. She's our fifth dog. In fact, she's on the cover of my book, Five Dogs.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah, we love dogs. We love dogs. I don't know what we would do without pets or animals of any type in our lives. They just teach you so much and keep you grounded, you know. Every time I get a big head about being the big shot writer and all that stuff, Kathy will say, well, yeah, now, Mr. Big Shot, it's time to take out the garbage and go out and clean up the dog poop out back. So dogs do have a way of keeping you grounded.
Indeed, indeed. And just bringing such joy. I mean, they're always happy to see you all the time. You walk in the door, they're happy to see you, you know?
Yeah, Stella has a really short memory. I could walk in the room after going out to get a soda and coming back, and she goes the same as if I've been gone for a week. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love pets. I love dogs.
So getting back to your writing, you said you've got, a book that's coming out here in 2025, or depending on when you're listening to it, it might already be out. Can you tell me more about that and how it may have been different or the same in terms of like the creative process for your other books?
Okay, the new book, which will be out probably within the next couple days. I don't know how quickly this will air, but it may be out by the time this airs. The new book is called "Don't Shoot the Messenger, Just Give Him a Good Place to Hide." And for some reason, they've thrust on me the mantle of being. Some people have called me the master of minimalism in the neo-noir and modern poetry, whatever that means.
It sounds fancy, though. You should put it on a business card.
I think it means I write short poems, and some of which are dark, but and short. Yeah, for the most part, my poems are very short. And this new book, "Don't Shoot the Messenger," again, is hopefully funny. It bothers me when too many writers of poetry, especially writers of poetry, take themselves too seriously. I think that's what's killed poetry. You go out and walk around, and I think 6 people on every city block have a book of poetry out, but it's all serious and dark and sad and self-important. And I wrote an article the other day saying that the last really important big poem for me, for my opinion, was Bukowski's Bluebird. It's a great, great poem, and if you're not familiar with it, Google it. Bluebird by Charles Bukowski. And for my money, that was the last really great poem that I think will be written for a long, long time. And for my part in all this, if I have any lasting effect, I'm not going to say greatness because that'll never happen. But if I have any lasting effect, it'll be through the accumulation of my work. I want all my poems, all those almost 3,500, to add up into, each one is a little brick in the wall. And I want the whole bunch of the poems to be my great poem. I don't want one poem to be my great poem. Mm. Hope that answers the question. In fact, I don't even remember what the question was.
That's all right. That's all right. That's such an interesting concept, how you want all of your work versus, something specific standing out,
I always felt that way. When I was a kid and through much of my life, and even now, I always admired those actors who were the journeymen. I like looking at old movies, and I look in the background and always the bit players who showed up in movie after movie after movie. I wanted to be those kind of guys who built a career by being consistent. I didn't want to be flashy because flash denotes fire and fire burns out really quick. I wanted to be consistent.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've been feeling burned out, stressed, overwhelmed, or exhausted, the resources and courses at the Self-Care Institute are here to support you. The Self-Care Institute was founded by Dr. Ami Kunimura and provides support for individuals and organizations with burnout prevention, burnout recovery, and stress management. I've personally taken a few of these courses and found them to be super helpful, both professionally and personally. The care you give yourself matters just as much as the care you give to others. But if self-care is difficult for you, you're not alone. And the Self-Care Institute is here to support your well-being, resilience, and sense of fulfillment at work and at home. For more information, visit selfcareinstitute.com or go to the show notes and click on the link. That makes sense. And you have quantity, but you also have quality. I mean, like I said, I love your work, and, I think it's, I haven't seen your newest yet, but I look forward to it. And I look forward to, continuing the journey, watching your journey of writing, because, that's the great thing about the creative and fine arts. Like, as long as someone's willing to do it and healthy enough to put pen to paper or violin bow to string or whatever, you can play, sing, write for as long as you can, as long as you're living.
Turn into the Rolling Stones. We're talking about the new book. Let me read one short poem from the new book.
Oh, of course. You can even read 2 short poems if you want to.
Oh, no, well, I'll read 2, but I'll read one from that book and one from the other recent book called Present Tense. The new book, like I said, is called Don't Shoot the Messenger, Just Give Him a Good Place to Hide. And this poem from that book is called The Place Smelled Like the Blues. The place smelled like the blues. It smelled of sweat and poverty and last night's turnip greens. But it's where he did his best writing, poems filled with sadness and the agony of a shot glass left empty in a sink filled with dishes, tears, and more than a little regret. That's in the new book. And I don't write many longish poems. For me, this is a long one. This is from the same book. And for me, this is a long one. It's a page and a half long. Take a walk around the old neighborhood where I grew up, on the street where I lived. Take a left at the corner and walk down the hill toward the track. There used to be an old oak tree. We called the old oak tree. It was the biggest tree I ever saw and hard as hell to climb. The lowest branches were high and you had to jump to grab one. And it was always kind of cool if you made it and got to sit there on the branches, waiting for a train, or to watch kids on their bike flying down the hill towards the gas station. It's gone now, all of it. Right after the flood, they got rid of the tree and put in a road where the kids used to ride. The road's smooth and new, and there's nothing there to give you any shade or even a reason to climb. A lot of my poems are about memory, loss, and regret. My book, my little memoir called The Street, I kind of described this as a poem with a thyroid condition. It's prose, but it's a book about what it was like for me growing up back then in the time period, about that tree that I just wrote about. And The Street is about what it felt like for me growing up in the late 1950s. God, the late 1950s. Long time ago. In the late 1950s, when, like I said, all of our parents were in the coal mines and we didn't have too much. But I think if people got this book, they might like it. It's called The Street. And to get my books, which are on Amazon, oddly, to find a more complete list, you have to go to Amazon under their book category and then search my name to find it, especially this book, The Street. If you just search my name, it won't show up. But if you go under books and search The Street, you'll find it. Let me read one from the book called Present Tense, which is the book that came out just before this newest. He tended to forget that more than anything, life is a condition, and things like hunger, cold, and death are only elements of that condition. So when she came to him giving off a music that had no sound, he was confused, scared, and more than a little bit sad. He looked at her and said, "This is all just a mistake, a sentimental idea that does neither of us any good." She was naked, he was sad, and the morning light coming through the window had nothing more to add. That's my book, Present Tense. That's all I'm going to read to you. I feel uncomfortable reading my poems. I don't know how to put a description on that, but it makes me uncomfortable. I've been doing this for forever. My first reading was back around 1970. It's funny. One of the first readings I ever gave was at a college at an open mic. It was back in the early 70s, and my friend used to play guitar behind me, and my then future wife used to come with us, and she had long, straight, great-looking black hair. And we walked into this reading, which was run by all the intellectuals of the college, and they all had their little clique. And we walk in, and here walks in this guy holding a stack of poems, me, with this beautiful young girl, Kathy, with her long black hair, and my friend holding the guitar, and the guy on the stage. The whole place got quiet. The guy on the stage looks over at us, looks over at his friends, and says, "Hey, look who just walked in, Peter, Paul, and Mary." And that was funny, but it kind of hurt too. But I'm still writing the poems, still reading the poems, and I don't know whatever happened to that guy that made the joke.
I appreciate you reading and sharing some poems today, but I also appreciate that you acknowledge that it made you feel uncomfortable. I mean, I know you're proud of your work. I know it's part of who you are, but it's a whole different ball game to read it than it is to write it,
Well, yeah. And, if you're doing the writing correctly, if you're doing it right, you're really exposing part of yourself, and getting up in front of people exposing part of yourself is kind of scary. I did one a couple of weeks ago at a bookstore, really cool independent bookstore. And most of the people in the audience were from the local college. And I think they got extra credit for, maybe they even got out of a class to come to see me. But all these young kids, 19, 18, 20, I don't know how old they were, but they're all sitting there, and I'm standing up in front of them, and I'm reading my poems, and nothing's happened. Nobody's laughing, nobody's smiling, nobody's clapping. And then I realized these are students. Here's this old guy with gray hair, bow legs, and a funny looking shirt, standing up talking to them. They're looking at me like I'm some sort of professor, a teacher. And so they didn't know how to respond. So they just sat there respectfully and listened to me. And that really threw off my game until a guy in the back kind of realized what was going on, and he started laughing and clapping, and the kids kind of opened up, and things kind of took off from there. But that was a really interesting reading. And again, there I was, almost 74 years old, exposing this part of myself to those kids, and that it's a really intimate kind of connection. Hard to explain, but maybe I just did.
Yeah. Yeah. Being vulnerable in the creative space, I don't think it gets necessarily easier however long you do it. It just becomes a different sensation, or maybe you're able to tolerate it better, you know?
You get thick skin. Yeah, jeez. We talk about me doing this for a long time. It's really weird, and I said this to my publisher this morning in an email, with this book getting really close to coming out or being out right now as we speak, that I still get really excited when I see the cover art, when I see the layout for the book. I get as excited now as I did back in 1970 when my first book was coming out. So maybe that speaks of being a good thing for me, that I still got whatever excitement it takes to do what I do at hopefully a high level. I still enjoy it. I still enjoy talking to people like you every day. I get nervous. I come down here into my office, which is really just a basement with my desk and my books and stuff. But I get nervous. I'll walk down, I'll pet the dog, I'll kiss my wife, and sometimes I'll screw up and kiss the dog and pet my wife. I get a bottle of water, and Kathy will wish me luck. And I come down here and I get excited and nervous to talk to people like you who give me the opportunity to share my poems and my book and my 74 years with them. So this is fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it definitely seems. I'm so excited for you that you get to do something that you love to do, and it fills your creative well. And I know you've mentioned that you haven't always done this. You've worked other jobs. As most people in the arts community do, piece together things to make life work. But I'm so glad that
I was reading in the latest issue of Smithsonian Magazine. Yes, I subscribed to Smithsonian Magazine. Shoot me, okay? In the latest issue of Smithsonian Magazine, it had a really neat article about a musician, and he used to try to be a popular musician, but then he found his niche. He goes out in the forest and he records nature sound, trees and things, and he plays his music responding to the sounds of a train will be passing by, honking blowing its whistle, and whatever ambient sounds come in, that becomes part of his response musically. And it's really interesting. And it said in the article that he's never earned more than $20,000 a year from his art, from his music. But the guy in the pictures they showed of him, he looked really happy, really fulfilled. And at the end of the day, if you're having a life, isn't that what it's all about, to be happy and fulfilled? The dollars don't matter. It's just, did I have a good run? And for me, I hope I did.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. I love that mindset, just being happy, being fulfilled, like whatever that means to you, because success isn't necessarily, like you said, a dollar amount, or how many books you've published, or how many paintings you've sold, or songs you've sold. It's about the work and about it filling your cup, and then you inspiring other people. I say you, collective you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. When it comes to the book, by the time the books are published, my work is done. Then I have to put on the other hat, the salesman's hat, because I've always felt I owe a really great debt to these publishers. And, I'm not with Random House or any big publishers. I'm with mom and pop businesses who take their hard-earned money to put schlemiels like me in print. And that's a big responsibility that I take seriously. So I then take off my artist's hat and put on my salesman's hat and go out and try to get those things sold, because I want these businesses that support me to succeed. It's a little bit of a balance, but I hope people do buy my books, not for me, but to support those small businesses. And publishing is their art, their fulfillment. So it'll keep them happy too.
Excellent. We've got just enough time for one more question. Would you like something quirky or something serious?
Oh, let's do the quirk.
Okay. What is a sound that bothers you and a sound that you love?
Sound that bothers me is the word no. And the sound that I love, my dog snoring.
Oh, I love that. Dog snores are like the cutest thing.
Isn't it?
They're
I
just
swear
so
to God.
adorable.
Yeah, that's our Stella. And if you go to Amazon, again, I'm wearing the salesman's hat. If you go to Amazon and go to books and look at my books, you'll see Stella on the cover of Five Dogs. And you'll also, if you get that book, you'll see stories about the other four wonderful dogs we've had. In any case, this is I'm really happy to have you shine your light in my direction again. This is always fun talking to you because you, as a host, you seem really genuine. And I appreciate that very much.
Oh, thank you so much, John. Readers, please check the show notes for links to purchase John's previous books, his upcoming books, and he doesn't have a website, but we will definitely connect you with ways that you can connect to him in other aspects and show him love and affection in terms of buying his books, reviewing, etc. Always very important for poets, authors, whether they're indie published, hybrid published, traditionally published. So as always, thank you for supporting and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Creative Piecemeal. We hope today's episode left you feeling inspired. This podcast is independently created and produced by the host, Tammy Takaishi. More details about today's guest can be found in the show notes, along with links to the podcast's socials, merch store, and ways to support arts organizations AHA Broadway and New Normal Rep, both near and dear to Tammy's heart. Don't forget to visit creativepiecemeal.com, the official podcast website, where you can leave fan mail, write a review, explore Tammy's blog, and discover the growing collection of episodes. Special thanks to our audio engineer, Alex Repetti. Additional narration by Dante Jace. Let's keep celebrating creativity in all its forms.